Hello and welcome to the first in a little series of videos showing how I'm going to rewire my EV-swapped BMW Z3. Now let's be honest, it's a series because I made quite a few mistakes when I did this the first time around. Particularly there's three questions I have to answer, three things I have to fix as I go through this. And they're to do with both the high voltage and the low voltage system and the interaction between them. So before I get started and start showing you wiring and me making bits and 3D printing stuff, I thought I'd do a quick explainer video about the three questions I'm trying to answer as I go through this process. In order to understand the first question I'm trying to answer, you have to understand a little bit about the high voltage system in the car. The 330 volts in the battery is not permanently connected to the inverter that drives the car or the charger that returns some power to the battery. Instead, it's separated by a series of contactors and relays that go through a particular sequence to slowly charge up the big capacitor in the inverter, rather than dumping all that current in at once and damaging something. The first part of the sequence is pretty simple. When the key is in the off position, or rather the key is not in the car, the pre-charge relay, the negative contactor and the positive contactor, these are the two big switches on the main lines, they're all open, they're all off. Then when you turn your key to the first position, two things happen. First of all, the negative contactor closes, connecting the negative line from the battery into the inverter and from there on into everything else. And the pre-charge relay closes. Now the pre-charge relay goes through a big resistor to slowly trickle some electrons, let's call them, into the inverter and charge up that capacitor. Once that pre-charge sequence is done, you turn the key momentarily to the start position, and this closes the final contactor, the main contactor, and opens the pre-charge relay. Now you've got a full bore connection between your batteries and your inverter for driving and anything else. So while you have three modes there in the high voltage system, you also have a few different modes in the 12 volt system as well. Obviously there's off, where everything's off. Then when you turn the key, certain things have to come on. The inverter, which controls the contactors, the charger, which provides the DC to DC converter when that's enabled to charge up the 12 volt battery, and the battery management system. Turn the key to the start position and a few other things have to come on as well. The DC to DC converter needs to be enabled. This is like your alternator to charge up the 12 volt battery. The motor needs to be enabled so that you can drive. This is done by turning on some switchgear that tells the inverter which position to drive the motor. You need cooling for your electrics and for the motor itself. And you need your safety gear, the power steering pump and the brake booster. The challenge comes when you want to charge. You need the contactors closed to carry all that current. You want the DC to DC converter on so that your 12 volt battery doesn't go flat while you're charging. And you need cooling because the charger can get pretty toasty while it's shifting all that AC into DC. But you don't want the motor enabled so that you can't drive away by accident when you're connected to the charging point. And you don't want the noisy power steering pump and brake booster running, chewing up power from that 12 volt battery while you're trying to charge it. So the first question we want to answer in this rewiring project is, how do we turn on the cooling and the DC to DC converter when we're in charge mode, but not the other run mode stuff that makes a noise and chews up all those electrons? There is a second charge mode related problem with my wiring. When I put it all in, I had a switch and a button to turn on charge mode, then close the contactors. The problem was I had the DC to DC converter enable line connected to that charge mode switch, so that I was enabling the DC to DC converter before I closed the contactors. I very quickly learned that if you try and pull all that current through the pre-charge relay and more importantly the pre-charge resistor to power the DC to DC converter without having closed the main contactors, that resistor goes boom. I don't want to admit how many times I have released the magic smoke from that resistor. Suffice to say, I have now run out of ones that fit in my BMW S box, and I can't find any more. So, second challenge for this rewiring project. How do we close the contactors before entering charge mode without the key being in the ignition? Because right now what I'm doing is turning the key to run, manually disabling the switchgear, the power steering pump and the brake booster, and then charging. There is an answer to this, which is that I get my battery management system to close the contactors on the inverter by sending commands via CAN bus. The problem is that CAN bus isn't working between my BMS and my inverter at the moment. So one of the things we're going to have to do is diagnose that and fix it. The final question we have to answer is, how do we power the car up so that we can charge without putting the key in? Because obviously that's not ideal. Again, there's already an answer to this question. It's been solved by my friend Jamie, who you've seen in previous videos, with his little PP detect module. Yes, I know it sounds funny. We're going to install one of these that will provide power to the car, turning on the on circuit, if you like, the pre-charge circuit, so that the BMS and other bits can do their work, closing the contactors and starting the charge cycle. So that's the plan. A short video for now, just to lay out what I'll be doing. I've already got most of the parts ready to go. It's actually all underway in breaks in the rain. When there's some nice weather, I'm getting out and doing some bits, and you'll see those shortly. But that's what I'm doing to fix the wiring on my DIY EV. Hope that was useful. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you do like this, please do like and subscribe. I'd really like to make this a bit of a thing next year in 2022. So yeah, please do like and subscribe.